The Omnivore's Dilemma, A Natural History of 4 Meals by Michael Pollan. Here's something wild. You're basically made of corn. No, seriously. Scientists can snip a strand of your hair, run it through a machine, and trace the carbon atoms in your body back to their source. And for most North Americans, that source is overwhelmingly one plant, corn. A biologist who studied this didn't mince words. We look like corn chips with legs. I mean, come on. How does that even happen? How did a tropical grass from Central America end up so completely taking over our lives that it's in our steak, our soda, and yes, even the batteries in your TV remote? This is the rabbit hole that Michael Pollan dives into with his game-changing book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. It became a massive bestseller and fundamentally shifted how millions of people think about their food. And it all starts with the most deceptively simple question imaginable. What should I have for dinner? Sounds easy, right? But here's the thing. As Pollan discovered, and as you're about to find out, this question has become absurdly, ridiculously complicated. We're living through what he calls a national eating disorder, where we actually need journalists and scientists to tell us what to eat. Think about that for a second. Today, we're going on a journey that'll blow the doors wide open on our food system. We're going to trace your meals all the way back to the dirt they came from. And I'm telling you right now, by the time we're done, you'll never look at your dinner plate the same way again. We're going to follow 3 completely different food chains. The massive industrial machine that feeds most of us, a gorgeous grass-based farm that shows us another path, and finally the oldest food chain of all, the one our ancestors lived on for millennia. This isn't just about summarizing a book. This is about understanding how we actually live. So buckle up and let's dive in. Our adventure begins in the most ordinary yet most baffling place imaginable, your typical American supermarket. Picture yourself walking through those automatic doors. You're hit with this gorgeous display of nature's abundance, shiny red apples, vibrant leafy greens, every imaginable color of fruit. It looks like a celebration of biodiversity, right? Like nature's greatest hits album. But here's the plot twist. It's basically theater. Michael Pollan decided to play detective. He grabbed a shopping cart and traced random items all the way back to where they actually came from. He figured this journey would take him to farms all over the world, right? Different crops, different places, a real global tour. Nope. Whether he was tracking Twinkies, ketchup, or a plastic-wrapped steak, every trail led to the exact same place, a massive field of American corn. That supermarket, with its 45,000 different products, it's basically a corn museum in disguise. Think about this. The cow that became your burger ate corn. The chicken that laid your eggs? Corn. Even the farmed salmon on your plate is being trained to eat corn, which is bonkers if you think about it. But it gets crazier. Pick up basically any processed food and read the label. High fructose corn syrup? Corn. Modified cornstarch holding your chicken nugget together? Corn. The flour and the batter, the oil it's fried in, even that citric acid keeping it fresh, all corn. More than a quarter of everything in that supermarket contains corn in some form. So how did one plant basically take over America? To understand this, we need to visit a farm in Iowa, where a guy named George Naylor works 470 acres of corn and soybeans. His story is basically the story of modern agriculture in a nutshell. When his grandfather farmed this same land, it was this beautiful, diverse ecosystem. Hay, oats, cattle, pigs, chickens, all living together. The farm pretty much fed itself. Crops fed the animals. Animal manure fed the crops. The whole thing ran on sunlight. But George Naylor's farm today, it's a factory. 2 crops, corn and soybeans. That's it. What changed? After World War II, something huge happened. All those munitions plants that made explosives from ammonium nitrate suddenly needed a peacetime gig. Someone had a brilliant idea: chemical fertilizer. This was actually a turning point for humanity. Before this, the Earth could only support as much life as natural nitrogen would allow, from bacteria, lightning, that sort of thing. But this German chemist named Fritz Haber figured out how to yank nitrogen straight out of the air using massive pressure and heat, all powered by fossil fuels. Suddenly you didn't need to wait for nature, you could just buy fertility in a bag. We stopped eating sunshine and started eating oil. This chemical boost, combined with crazy productive hybrid corn, meant farmers could grow absolutely ridiculous amounts of corn, way more than anyone needed. And here's where it gets interesting. The government didn't step in to slow things down, they hit the gas pedal. Under a guy named Earl Butz in the 1970s, farm policy basically became, quote, grow as much corn as humanly possible. Instead of supporting farmers with decent prices, they started subsidizing every single bushel. This created a corn tsunami, a mountain of cheap calories. And here's the thing about nature: surpluses never last. Something always evolves to eat them. In this case, the entire modern food industry. And that brings us to the next stop on our tour, the feedlot. To really understand how corn becomes meat, Pollan did something pretty extraordinary. He bought his own steer. Calf number 534, born on this beautiful grassy ranch in South Dakota. For the first 6 months of his life, this little guy lived the dream. He grazed on prairie grasses, hung out with his mom, did cow things. Here's the beautiful part. Cows and grass are basically nature's perfect couple. A cow's stomach, this incredible 4-chambered fermentation tank called the rumen, is specifically designed to turn grass, which we can't digest, into high-quality protein. The cow fertilizes the grass feeds the cow. It's a solar-powered miracle. So why didn't steer 534 get to keep living this idyllic life? One word: speed. A grass-fed animal takes maybe 4 or 5 years to reach full size, but the industrial system? They can rocket a steer from 80 pounds to over 100 pounds in just 14 months. The secret fuel? Corn. At 6 months old, steer 534 got shipped to a feedlot in Kansas, a place the industry calls a concentrated animal feeding operation, or CAFO. Imagine a city made of cattle. Tens of thousands of animals crammed into pens, standing in an ocean of their own manure. Here's where things get dark. This animal, literally designed by millions of years of evolution to eat grass, is now forced to eat corn, and it makes him chronically sick. The corn turns his neutral rumen acidic, giving him constant heartburn. This leads to bloat, acidosis, liver abscesses. Between 15 and 30% of feedlot cattle have abscessed livers by the time they're slaughtered. The only reason this nightmare works is because the animals are pumped full of antibiotics around the clock, which, by the way, is helping create antibiotic-resistant superbugs. Great. But wait, it gets worse. This acidic, corn-fed gut environment has actually created a new strain of bacteria, E. coli 0157H7. Unlike normal E. coli, this monster can survive our stomach acid and cause fatal kidney failure. We literally created this killer by feeding an animal food it was never meant to eat. Steer 534's short, miserable life represents industrial logic crushing evolutionary wisdom. His journey, like millions of animals, ends on a kill floor so hidden from public view that Pollan wasn't even allowed to see it. All this to turn a mountain of cheap corn into affordable meat. But not all the corn goes to feedlots. A huge chunk takes another path, straight into the processed food aisle. About a fifth of the corn harvest goes to these massive factories called wet mills. Think of a wet mill as industrial-scale digestion. It takes a corn kernel and, through this complex process of soaking, grinding, and spinning, breaks it down into basic building blocks. The germ becomes corn oil. The fiber becomes vitamins. But the real treasure is the endosperm, this huge starch packet. This starch is corn's superpower. Food chemists have learned to transform it into hundreds of different compounds. This is where we get everything from citric acid to ethanol to the crown jewel, high fructose corn syrup. In 1980, Coca-Cola started switching from sugar to the slightly cheaper high fructose corn syrup. By 1984, both Coke and Pepsi had made the switch. Now, you'd think they'd just swap one sweetener for another and call it a day, right? Wrong. The price of sweetener crashed. And what did the soda companies do? They supersized everything. The logic was genius, in a diabolical way. Since the raw material was now dirt cheap, they could sell way bigger portions for just pennies more. The 8-ounce bottle became 20 ounces, then 32, then the absolutely bonkers 64-ounce big gulp. We went from sipping soda to practically bathing in it. And this cheap corn sweetener snuck into everything: ketchup, bread, hot dogs, salad dressing. This flood of cheap corn calories is a huge reason we're facing an obesity epidemic. Since the 1970s, American farmers have produced 500 extra calories per person per day, and we're eating about 200 of them. Our bodies, designed for a world where food was scarce, are hardwired to feast whenever possible. In a world of 24/7 McDonald's, that ancient survival instinct has become our worst enemy. The industrial food chain reaches its peak when Pollan shares a meal with his wife and son at McDonald's, eaten in a moving car. Cheeseburger, chicken McNuggets, fries, large Coke. Looks like variety, right? Beef, chicken, potatoes. But when they run this meal through a mass spectrometer, the same machine that analyzes hair, the truth comes out. The soda is 100% corn, the milkshake 78%, the salad dressing 65%, the nuggets 56%, the cheeseburger 52%. The variety is an illusion. We're not omnivores choosing from nature's buffet. We're basically corn's pet. We are processed corn, walking around. This is the industrial food chain. It's efficient, it's cheap, and it rules our world. But that cheapness is fake. The real costs are hidden, buried in environmental damage, health problems, and animal suffering. Which raises the obvious question: is there a better way? To find out, we leave the flat black earth of Iowa and head to the rolling green hills of Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, to a place called Polyface Farm. The guy running this farm, Joel Salatin, calls himself a Christian conservative libertarian environmentalist lunatic farmer. And he doesn't say he's a chicken farmer or cattle rancher. He calls himself a grass farmer. Everything at Polyface revolves around grass. His farm is the photographic negative of George Naylor's operation. Where Naylor has monoculture, Salatin has diversity. Where Naylor runs on fossil fuels, Salatin runs on sunshine. Where Naylor produces waste, Salatin has zero waste. Because Polyface isn't modeled on a factory, it's modeled on a natural ecosystem, and it's absolutely beautiful to watch. It starts with the cows. Salatin practices management-intensive grazing, moving his cattle to fresh grass every single day. They munch the grass down, fertilize it with their manure, and move on. This mimics how bison used to graze the prairies, and it keeps both the cattle and the grass incredibly healthy. But here's where it gets brilliant. 3 or 4 days after the cows leave, Joel brings in the eggmobile, this portable henhouse for his laying hens. Why? Because in nature, birds always follow herbivores. The hens are basically the cleanup crew. They attack the cowpats and scratch them apart, eating the fly larvae and grubs that have been fattening up inside. This one simple act accomplishes 3 things at once. First, the hens get up to 1/3 of their food for free, turning pests into protein. Second, they sanitize the pasture, breaking the parasite life cycle that would normally plague the cows. No need for chemical dewormers. And third, they spread the manure perfectly across the field, fertilizing the grass. It's a perfect closed loop. Cowpats become eggs. The dance continues. The broiler chickens live in bottomless, portable pens that move 10 feet every morning onto fresh grass. They also get part of their diet from grass and bugs, and their nitrogen-rich manure supercharges the pasture. Even the pigs have a role. In winter, the cattle live in a barn on deep bedding made of wood chips and straw. Joel scatters corn into this bedding. The corn ferments all winter. Then, in spring, he brings in the pigs. He calls them his pigarators. In their ecstatic hunt for the alcoholic corn, the pigs perfectly turn and aerate the entire pile, transforming it into gorgeous compost that gets spread back on the pastures. The pigs aren't just happy. They're doing the work of a machine, and they're loving every second of it. This is a farm built on respecting the pigness of the pig and the chickenness of the chicken. It's a system of beautiful complexity, where every species, just by being itself, helps the others. This is nature's efficiency, not a factory's. But here's where things get complicated. The word we usually associate with this better way of farming is organic. But as the organic movement has exploded into an $11 billion industry, it started looking more and more like the industrial system it was supposed to replace. Pollan calls this big organic, or supermarket pastoral. He introduces us to Rosie, the free-range organic chicken sold at Whole Foods. Her life, turns out, isn't that different from her regular factory chickens. She lives with 20,000 other birds in a giant shed. And the free-range part? It's a tiny patch of grass behind a small door that stays shut for the first 5 or 6 weeks of her 7-week life. The chickens almost never go outside. We learn that organic milk can come from massive factory farms, where thousands of cows live in dry, grassless lots, eating certified organic grain shipped from hundreds of miles away. The government rules, stretched and twisted by big corporations, only require access to pasture, a standard so vague it's basically meaningless. The industrial mindset has learned to fake the pastoral dream. Sure, the food is grown without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, which is genuinely better for the environment. But the factory logic, specialization, centralization, bigger is better, is still running the show. An organic TV dinner can contain 31 ingredients from half a dozen states and 2 countries, including something called natural grill flavor. So even here, in the world of organic food, the confusion persists. The labels tell a story, but that story doesn't always match reality. Which leaves us with one final food chain to explore, the oldest, shortest, and most fundamental one of all, the personal food chain, the path of the hunter-gatherer. To explore this, Pollan sets himself a crazy challenge: prepare a meal using only ingredients he's hunted, gathered, or grown himself. For a modern guy who's never fired a gun and was taught that wild mushrooms are basically poison, this is huge. This journey isn't about finding a practical way to feed everyone. There are too many of us, and not enough wilderness for that. Instead, this is a philosophical quest, to see what it feels like to eat in full consciousness of everything involved, to take direct, personal responsibility for the life and death that's part of every meal. He finds a guide, this Sicilian blacksmith, named Angelo Gero, a guy who lives by the rhythm of the seasons, hunting boar, foraging mushrooms, making his own wine. The first step is learning to see the world through a forager's eyes. A simple walk in the woods becomes this exercise in hungry attention. The ground, once just background scenery, becomes a text full of clues. Freshly turned soil where a pig rooted, a subtle lift in the leaves that reveals a hidden mushroom. The mushroom hunt really drives home the dilemma. How do you know what's safe? You can read books, sure, but the most reliable knowledge comes from a trusted person. He only ate his first wild chanterelle after Angelo, his guide, handed it to him. Trust, community, shared experience. These are humanity's oldest tools for figuring out what not to eat. But the heart of this quest is the hunt. He decides to hunt a wild pig, a feral animal considered a pest in California. The experience changes him. Walking through the forest with a rifle, his senses become incredibly sharp. The world gets louder and brighter. He describes feeling utterly present, almost like meditation, as if his brain chemistry has shifted to match his hunter-gatherer ancestors. After one failed attempt where he freezes up, he finally gets his shot. The moment of the kill is this chaotic explosion of adrenaline and emotion. He feels pride, relief, even gratitude, not remorse, which surprises him. But that feeling gets complicated fast. The process of dressing the animal, turning a living creature into meat, is messy and hard. He's confronted with the reality of the pig, its internal organs looking so much like his own. This triggers this deep, primal disgust, another one of the omnivore's ancient safety mechanisms. Later, someone sends him a photo of himself kneeling behind the dead animal with this huge, proud grin on his face. The image shocks him. It seems wrong. He's actually ashamed of his own joy. This, he realizes, is the hunter's burden. It's an experience that's both thrilling and shameful, beautiful and brutal. It's not easy or simple, and that's exactly its value. It forces you to confront the reality of eating meat head-on, without the comfortable distance that shrink wrap provides. Finally, all the elements come together. The wild pig, morels from a burned forest in the Sierras, fava beans and lettuce from his garden, wild yeast captured from the air for bread, cherries gathered from a neighbor's overhanging tree. He invites his guides, Angelo and the others who helped him, to the table. This is the perfect meal. Not because the food was flawless, but because every single ingredient had a story, and every story could be told in the first person, by someone sitting right there. This meal was perfectly transparent. He knew exactly where it came from, how it lived and died, and what it truly cost, in effort, energy, and life. It was a meal fully paid for, with no hidden debts to the environment or the future. Sitting at that table, sharing stories and food so deeply connected to the world around them, the meal became more than food. It became a ritual, a way of saying grace without words. And right there, the journey comes full circle. The original question, what should we have for dinner, was never about finding one right answer. It was about recovering the connections that the industrial food system worked so hard to make us forget. Whether we're eating a fast food burger made of corn, a pastured chicken raised on grass, or a wild pig from the forest, we're eating the body of the world. The omnivore's dilemma isn't a problem with a single solution. It's a relationship to be managed, and Pollan suggests that relationships should be built on knowledge, respect, and gratitude. So what do we actually take away from this wild ride? For me, the most powerful lesson in the omnivore's dilemma isn't that one food chain is good and another is evil. It's that our food choices aren't just personal. They have real consequences that ripple out into the world, shaping landscapes, communities, our health, and the lives of other species. This book is a wake-up call that we've been systematically taught to be ignorant about our food. The industrial food chain thrives on keeping us in the dark. It literally puts up walls around feedlots and slaughterhouses so we don't have to look. It replaces stories with barcodes and relationships with price tags. And in that ignorance, we become part of a system that's often destructive, unhealthy, and inhumane. But here's the hopeful part. The book shows us there are other ways. That image of Joel Salatin's farm, that gorgeous, complex dance of animals and grass, is proof of what agriculture could be, a system that heals the land instead of destroying it. It reminds us that nature's logic, based on diversity and cooperation, can be way more efficient and resilient than the brittle, simplified logic of a factory. And that final journey, the hunt for the perfect meal, teaches us the deepest lesson, what it feels like to be fully accountable for what we eat. Most of us will never hunt our own boar or forage for mushrooms, and that's fine, that's not the point. The point is to understand what's at stake, to remember that every meal has a history, and we're part of that history. So how can you actually use this in your own life? It doesn't require some radical overnight transformation. It starts with a simple shift in awareness. First, just look. Next time you're at the supermarket, grab something you buy all the time, cereal, sauce, whatever, and actually read the ingredients. See if you can spot the corn. Ask yourself, where did this come from? That one little act of curiosity is your first step out of ignorance. Second, connect. If you can, visit a local farmer's market. You don't even have to buy anything. Just walk around. Pick one farmer and ask them a question. How do you grow your tomatoes? Or what do your chickens eat? That one small human connection starts rebuilding the trust that the industrial system has shattered. And third, participate. Try cooking one meal this week completely from scratch. Not from a box or can, but from whole, actual ingredients. It doesn't have to be fancy, but the simple act of transforming raw ingredients into a meal reminds you that you're not just a passive consumer. You're a creator. You're a participant in the great chain of life. Ultimately, this book is a call to wake up. It teaches us that eating is an agricultural act, and a political one too. Every dollar you spend on food is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. Do you want to vote for monoculture and pollution, or for diversity, health, and respect for nature? The choice is ours, 3 times a day. That was a summary of The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. We've explored the main highways of our food system, but honestly, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in those quiet moments of reflection, when one of Pollan's beautifully told stories or a simple, profound observation makes you stop and see your own life differently. This summary is here to help you decide if this book deserves your time and attention. If anything we've talked about today sparked your curiosity, I genuinely encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can honestly change your relationship with the food you eat and the world you live in. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you a new perspective, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep exploring these powerful ideas and growing together.